Thank you all for joining us today alongside AiDASH, who will be showcasing an exciting tool, BNGAI, which Severn Trent have been using to help them meet the Ofwat biodiversity performance commitment, amongst other novel use cases. For those who aren't familiar with Spring, we are the Centre of Excellence for Innovation in the UK and Ireland, and our main objective is to enable effective delivery of innovation and collaboration by creating centralised intelligence for both water companies and suppliers. Our mission is to attract, connect and support innovators across the industry to accelerate transformation. That's why we facilitate events such as today. Through Spring Knowledge Sharing, we support the transfer of the learnings from an innovation project to the wider sector, creating project legacy that helps innovators to identify and adopt the right solutions at a greater pace. It's great to see the power of knowledge sharing already coming to life, with Northumbrian Water having recently adopted a 3D printing solution shared by United Utilities in a showcase last year. Northumbrian Water are now progressing plans for the UK's first underground water asset, a 3D printed in situ. So let's all try to frame today's event through this example of successful knowledge sharing and see the way Severn Trent are being open and honest about their learnings from this project today and how you can implement that at your own organisation too. So last year we partnered with Ofwat, the economic regulator for England and Wales, to build a view of what best practice knowledge sharing actually looks like. We brought together senior leaders and innovation managers to design a vision for knowledge sharing. What is it that we're trying to achieve? And ultimately, we want to unlock faster adoption by creating a world-class knowledge sharing culture. So the 6 principles we created were to learn from what already exists before committing to innovation projects, to target innovation insights to the right audience to meet our objectives. The insights are regularly shared through multiple channels from day one of the project. That sector knowledge is open and centralised, hence the creation of the Spring platform, which we will link in the chat in a moment. Number 5, that insights from both innovation successes and failures are shared, which we should see some of today from our project team. And finally, that people are empowered to receive and embed lessons from external today are really relevant to this topic area, but what can we do to make sure that you are empowered to actually embed those lessons within your organisation after today's event? So back to today, I would just like to give a warm welcome to all of the audience again who are joining us live. We are joined by nearly all of the UK and Ireland water companies, supply chain, academia, and lots of overseas colleagues too. So it's great to see you on the call, and thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll include a poll during this event to gain your feedback. Answering our poll is actually the most impactful way you can help us make sure these events are providing value to you, your organisation, and the wider sector, and that these showcases are in fact supporting faster pace adoption of solutions. Your insights not only help us to understand the actions you plan to take on the knowledge shared today, but if there was anything more we could have done or shared to ensure successful transfer of key insights from innovation projects. We'll launch the poll at the break, so please make sure to submit your answers when this comes through. We'll also launch it again at the end for those who didn't get a chance to answer during the break. You'll get the chance to ask the project team questions today in the Q&A session at the end, so do make sure to keep putting your queries in the chat throughout today's presentation. So I'm just going to quickly run through today's agenda before introducing the speakers and handing over. So after I've introduced the speakers, we'll hear a bit about the importance of knowledge sharing from Severn Trent and a little bit of context setting behind the project. We'll then have a project overview and live demo from AiDASH, and then discuss the return on investment piece from this project. After a quick break, we'll come back to hear more about the lessons learnt, and then we'll go into our Q&A session. So today we'll be hearing from Graham Osborne, who is Biodiversity and Ecology Lead at Severn Trent, Victoria Brown, Environmental Scientist at Severn Trent, Eloise Charion, Customer Success at AiDASH, and Lauren Weller, Senior Ecologist at AiDASH. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Graham, to kick us off. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for taking the time out this morning to listen to me talk about what we've been doing with AiDASH. And to start with, I just wanted to go through a little bit about why knowledge sharing is so important to Severn Trent, but also to me in particular. It wasn't too long ago I read a book by Matthew Saggy called Black Box Thinking, and that really puts it into context about where knowledge sharing really can add massive value. So back in the 1920s, if you were flying on a plane, you had a 1 in 666 chance of dying, whereas today it's 1 in 2.4 million chance. So that is through black box thinking. Compare that to the medical industry and the US healthcare industry, where there's 250 to 400,000 preventable deaths each year, because they haven't yet embraced this knowledge sharing, and embracing failure, I suppose, is the way to look at it. I think that's what these kind of importance of these kind of talks are, is to share those lessons that we've learned, embrace those failures, and look at different ways that we can perhaps work in the industry, but also looking outside of the box and thinking outside the box. Another one that some of you may be familiar with, and it's an image I've got on the screen here, is, and this is about that thinking outside the box and using different skill sets, and perhaps looking at other people that don't necessarily look down the ecology line, which is the route I've been looking at. And that is looking at a World War II plane. A mathematician called Abraham Wold was looking at this to help understand how they could best increase the survival rate. I've just realised it's another plane analogy, but how they could increase survival rate of planes coming back. And the himself looked at this, and he was asked to look at it as to why to increase the armour on these planes. Now, you could say just armour the whole thing. However, if you do that, you make it too heavy and therefore it's going to crash. So what a lot of the minds at the time were suggesting, well, looking at all of where the bullet holes is, that's the right place to put them. So let's re-armour that. But what Abraham said, and it's looking at it a different way, is actually where the bullet holes are is where these planes are coming back and surviving. So what you want to look at is the opposite of that, and that's looking at reinforcing where there are no bullet holes, and that increases your chances. And I think it's by sharing and knowledge sharing that we can ask those questions and embrace it through different lines of thought and different work streams. So if you're not from an ecology sector, you might have a question you think, oh, that's stupid, but it won't be. It will just be looking at it from a different angle. I think that's a really important part of answering the poll and asking questions that we can look at together later today. So where does this sit with Severn Trent? So back 3 years ago now, we introduced a Caring for Environment paper, and along with that, 3 different strategies: our biodiversity strategy, our approach to pollinators, and our protected site strategy. And to do all of those things, we need to be looking at how we best report on our sites. So we've got evidence of how the work we do on our sites and across our estate has value. For every pound we've spent so far, we've seen £2 to £20 in water treatment cost benefits through catchment management, peatland restoration. We've also seen another wider benefit of £4 per pound we spent. So that was our ambition, that's our strategic approach. But what we don't know is what we don't know. So taking another analogy, we've got unknown unknowns. And this is where coming into this approach really helped us. So hopefully most of you know, but we're into a new AMP now. So we've got 2025 to 2030. And as part of that, Ofwat have asked us to look at a common biodiversity outcome delivery incentive. And one of the statements in there is ensuring no deterioration. So how do we ensure no deterioration across 20,000 hectares of our estate? We have done some initial surveys. We started those a few years ago. We managed to survey 63 sites covering 3,000 hectares. We've done another 150 sites since then, which is up to 5,000 hectares. But doing some quick maths, that's 15,000 hectares that we still have yet gone out to assess and understand what is going on those sites. So that gave us opportunities to look at how we could look wider and beyond the problem that we've got now, which is how do we cover 15,000 hectares in as quick a time as possible? How do we then check that we're not deteriorating those habitats? And what do we know that's going on our sites? So that hopefully gives the context of the problem that we have today and the problem that we've hoped through this project with AiDASH that we're going to overcome. And so in summary, that just aligns with the principles and the biodiversity ADI that we need to deliver to make sure that we are going to be pushing forwards and getting a better understanding of the data that we're getting. I think another importance, there's a few different companies now using AiDASH within the water company, and I think it provides that overarching standardization so we can compare apples with apples, which will help us to then understand and commit to those ODI requirements. So That is all from me. So I'm now going to be passing over to my colleague from AiDASH, Eloise.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. So I'll be explaining to you how our work together with Severn Trent actually kind of comes together. So as Graham was speaking about, with this new biodiversity performance commitment, there's really a need to rethink how land is surveyed, especially with the annual assurance of no deterioration. It's simply using your traditional survey methods. It just doesn't allow you to be able to provide that kind of assurance. So what we've been working with Severn Trent on is a rethink around how land is surveyed for this water company. Now, one thing that I'd like to make extra clear, and we'll continue to repeat this throughout the presentation, but our approach is designed to be a hybrid approach of remote sensing, AI, and then expert ground surveys led by ecologists. So by no means does our platform BNGAI replace ecologists. The point is it's supposed to be a tool to help ecologists focus their attention on where it's needed most and removing some of the time that's currently used on data entry and reporting. So it's really the essence of what we're trying to do is bring the best of both worlds together. Now, let me now explain a little bit more how BNGAI, our platform, works. So it really centers around 3 capabilities. The first one, we essentially create preliminary habitat maps. And how we do that is we use remote sensing imagery and data layers to create that first take of a labeled map with different habitats. From there, that preliminary habitat map goes into the hands of ecologists who can use that as they go out to the field and essentially update that habitat with ground survey data. And then finally, the third capability is around automating reporting wizards. So the idea here is, again, to remove some of the time that is currently spent on these repeatable tasks and focus ecologists' time on where it's needed most. Let me walk you through how the process works, zooming into one specific project. So there are 5 steps to our process. The first one is for the client, in this case, Severn Trent, to provide us with what is the area of interest that we're going to be looking at. Typically, a shapefile delineating the red line boundary of what we're going to be assessing. And we use that red line boundary to purchase the right imagery to conduct this assessment. Typically, we're looking at remote sense imagery, whether it's aerial or satellite imagery, in the 30 to 50 centimeter resolution span. And we're obviously looking at that in terms of dates that are relevant to this scan. So typically we're looking at the last year's growing season, and we always optimize which actual picture we use based off of the quality of the image we're looking at. The next step is our proprietary AI models, which automates the step of creating the first stab of the habitat maps. So our image recognition models allow us to delineate one habitat from another and assign a habitat name to each of these little parcels or features. And this mapping ultimately is compliant with the DEFRA metric. So all of that ties neatly together. That's step 2. Now step 3, we have our in-house ecologists that will always provide that human in the loop approach to ensure that our output is of a high enough caliber of quality to deliver back to the clients. And then step 4, we apply, per the DEFRA metric, different kinds of multipliers to essentially convert our habitat map into a number of units. So those multipliers, for those who are a bit less familiar, are habitat conditions, strategic significance, and encroachment. I'll just highlight on one of these points, the habitat condition. Essentially how we do that at AiDASH is we take an average condition for that particular habitat that has been looked at from our side across the entire country to give a starting point essentially of what is the likely condition that this habitat is in. But now coming back to the final point of step 5, this is where the idea is the preliminary map that we produce at this point in time, that the idea is it can always be updated and enhanced based off of an actual field survey. So what was, for instance, a preliminary take of what the condition is likely to be. The idea is then we have the tooling to help our ecologists doing the field survey to update and enhance the data based off of what they're seeing on the ground. Now, let me kind of bring this all back to the Severn Trent use case. What does this mean for Severn Trent? Well, as Graham was mentioning earlier, using the current methods, there was significant parts of the estate that were left unvisited, causing some blind spots. And if I think of the one biggest impact that we brought to Severn Trent, it's really the ability to assess the entire estate in one go. And how we did that, even in the processing of this analysis, we prioritized sites that had never been looked at from Severn Trent, just to be able to help with that removing of blind spots as early as possible. And then now I'll bring it back to the biodiversity performance commitment, which is really the central use case of our joint work with Severn Trent today. So helping Severn Trent meet their biodiversity performance commitment, it translates into two parallel work streams. One is, on one hand, Severn Trent is thinking about delivering uplift on sites designated for the ODI. And then in parallel to that, be able to assure to Ofwat that there has been no deterioration across the estate. So we really help across both of those prongs to meeting the biodiversity performance commitment. How we do that is, as I mentioned just previously, we allow Severn Trent to efficiently scan the entire estate on an annual basis, something that is not possible using your traditional methods. We also allow, because we're running annual scans, we allow for that monitoring of what's happening year over year to be able to catch if there are some unexpected changes and or provide that annual assurance that there has been no deterioration. For specifically the sites designated for the uplift, we also enable optioneering through our planning functionality. And that's something that Victoria, my colleague from Severn Trent, will be demonstrating in a little bit. And then finally, the category of, let's say, the repeatable stuff. We allow our customers to automate reporting. So taking all the data we've collected and exporting it back out to customers in various formats compliant with DEFRA. I'll say one last kind of halo effect that's come from our work together, and something that we've learned a lot from Severn Trent, is the fact that we are assessing the entire estate in the same way. It brings some broader benefits to Severn Trent around centralizing and harmonizing how biodiversity is assessed, where previously there was a lot of differences in methodology between different types of partner ecologists. Maybe the data was difficult to access and difficult to query in a standardized way. So that's what the final benefit, I'll say, from us working together. Now, zooming out, we talked a lot today, and just to keep the message crisp, about one use case, the central use case, and that is helping Severn Trent meet their biodiversity performance commitment. I'll just allude to the fact that we're working with Severn Trent across a number of other work streams. The first, outside of the biodiversity performance commitment, is natural capital accounting, where we've delivered an assessment of the natural capital value of the estate for 2025. We're also in the early stages of exploring how our platform can help the capital projects team try and implement early and frequent optioneering in their due diligence process for the thousands of sites that are, thousands of projects that are slated for AMP8. And then this final row here that we're looking at, sustainable urban drainage systems, or SUDS, is a joint innovation project that we're leading with Severn Trent, which is trying to test ultimately how can we use the product in ways we hadn't even thought about. And in this case, it's using BNGAI to quantify the biodiversity and natural capital improvements that SUDS provide, looking at one particular pilot use case of Mansfield, where there were quite a few SUDs installed recently. So I'll leave that as a final note, and I will pass it now on to Victoria, who will be leading a demo of the platform BNGAI.
Hi everyone. So I'm Victoria Brown. I'm the Senior Environmental Scientist within the Biodiversity and Ecology team at Severn Trent. And in my role, I oversee our habitat enhancement programme on our own land. So this could be anything from grassland enhancement to managing existing woodlands to wetland creation or species recovery projects. And it's a proactive programme, and by that I mean it isn't linked to the planning process for construction or anything like that. And the aim is to improve the areas for nature, and we use BNG as the metric for the ODI for uplift. I'm going to do a demo of the platform today, looking at Carsington Water, which is one of our large visitor sites. We recently attended site to look at which parcels within the site we could look to include in the programme. And what the platform allows us to do is to investigate, if we were to put certain parcels through to improve them, what the potential uplift could be. So this is Carsington Water. You can see the amount of units in the baseline at the bottom. And if I just zoom into the top corner of the site and select the modified grassland, so you can see the baseline results there. If we go into create target, we can then change the habitat for the uplift, so it would be a grassland. And then if we go to other neutral grassland, so we'll change the habitat type and the condition, and we'll keep the strategic significance the same, and click apply. And what that will do is it will provide us what the potential uplift of that change would be. So that's one example. And if we were looking to include parcels in our woodland programme, so I can, on this left-hand side, filter to the woodland parcels, and then select them. And then because we're going to look at multiple parcels at the same time, you can use the multi-select tool. So we'll click a few polygons all together. And then what we can then do is make a bulk change to the results. So yeah, we've got all of the parcels there. So if we go down to create target again, and then handily, if you're not sure on which type of woodland you've selected, you can go into view source. Maybe I think it's a broadleaf woodland. If you then go to view source, what it does is it will provide you with all of the parcel details. So handily, they're all the same condition. So we'll put it up to good, and we'll keep the strategic significance as high, and that will bulk update the uplift for those results as well. So that's two ways that we use the platform. To summarise, the platform enables us to try out different options, and you can create multiple plans as well. So if we were looking at whether to include sort of a more intense regime on the site, we can set that up and then look at uplift against sort of effort and cost and resource. So that's me. I'll now pass on to go through the demo of the field app.
Hi, I'm Lauren Weller, Senior Ecologist here at AiDASH, and I'm going to take you through the survey app. So we've had a lovely demo of the platform and we've had an overview of our process, but once you've gotten our preliminary map, you may want to take that to site. So you can either add site data, or maybe you just know the site really well and you want to change some of the geometry, the polygons, you want to add some trees in, or maybe change the shape of some of the fields. This can all be done during our field app. And the great thing about our field app is that you're not sitting taking notes in the field on paper and then having to come back to the office and sync them all back. It's all automated and everything talks back to the system. So whatever you're doing in the field is automatically reflected back on the platform. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of the edits that you can do on the platform. The first thing we're going to look at is how you would do simple things like merging and splitting. So in this particular one, I'm just having a look through. I had a look at some of the habitats that were on site. Now looking at this little patch of woodland, over here. You can click on each of the polygons and then choose to merge them together. You can pick which of the habitats you want to choose to pull the attributes from. Now looking at an option to split a polygon, again, you go and you click split, then you would click on your polygon. You can use either a polygon itself or a line feature to split. In this case, I'm going to use a line. So we go, I'm just carving out the corner of the field there. Once again, you pick the attributes you want to pick and it will select them there. Okay, another thing we can do on the app is we can do condition assessments. So you're in the field, you're doing your condition assessment. There are a lot of questions we have to answer for BNG. The first thing you would do is you would validate the habitat type. And then you can capture not only your conditions, but also the justifications. So things like, why is the condition the way it is? This will help you when you get to HMMP. A lot of this data we would collect in the field, but it's often very, very time intensive when you get back to the office, having to put this all back into your spreadsheets and then having to calculate all of that back to the metric. So one of the advantages of the app is that whatever's captured in the field, as I said, is automatically synced, and that updates your BNG score, as well as any photos, justifications, condition notes you may want to make, they're all there. I'm going to let this run a little bit further, but I'm not going to take it all the way to the end. Essentially, what will happen is you can go through all of your habitat criteria. You can pull up the footnotes. You can see any additional information that you would have on your condition sheets is all available within the app. So the same information you have from DEFRA is all there. And when you're done, you just click finish and it syncs back, and it'll tell you in the app as well if you've answered all of the conditions for that site. If you're missing any questions on a particular habitat, it flags that. And so you're also in a position where if you're on site, you're unlikely to have forgotten to do anything on site because the app actually flags that to you. And so it's much easier not to miss out important steps. Right. Thank you. I'm going to hand back over to the team at Severn Trent for the return on investment piece.
So obviously you've now had a run through of everything that is gone on and how it's been working. And as I said at the beginning, I think one of the important challenges here is to uncover the unknown unknowns, which is looking at all the areas that we haven't looked at before. I think that's where we're going to really find some benefits through this, and certainly we have. It's also worth looking at the speed at which these kind of activities can be done. So on the slide here, I've got some examples, or one particular example where we had a 720 hectare site. It took AiDASH a week from end to end to do the, once provided with the red line boundary, going out, or virtually going out, assessing it, providing us the report, compared to just over a month for a traditional ecologist. It also gives that scalability, like I said before, and like Eloise mentioned, we're able to do our entire 20,000 hectare estate within 5 months, which for that repeatability, trying to go out year on year to make sure that the habitats aren't changing, it really is going to provide that whole scale kind of wider benefit, and also then increase the availability of your traditional ecologists once more to go out and do those condition assessments on the areas that we're either particularly interested in, or the areas maybe where the data isn't of the highest confidence, but then we allow that resource to go out and do those types of activities. So all in all, it's providing a wider range of importance, I suppose, than just financial. It's all about kind of the data. It's all about driving the right behaviours. It's all about consistency. It's all about kind of freeing up the resources to do more of the actual skilled activity that a traditional ecologist will need to go out when looking at nuances that perhaps they don't have the time to at the moment because they're going out to baseline a arable field, for example. Just, I suppose the learnings piece on this is largely recapping what we've all alluded to already. I think the main one is that this is a facilitation tool. It's not a replacement of traditional ecologists. I know I compared it earlier, but this is about freeing up more resource for ecologists to go out and do the more complex type surveys. It gives you that baseline assessment. And again, that is a baseline. It's not a replacement of needing to go out and do those physical surveys. It can just maybe identify areas that you wouldn't have necessarily gone to anyway. I think another really important piece of this for me is it's a kind of a two-way relationship with AiDASH, where we've come to them with issues as we've identified them and they've come to us with questions, and it's a kind of amalgamating the two and creating that kind of journey of coming up to a proper solution. I think that's one of my favourite phrases in the top right or left of your screen, whichever way you're looking at it. And that is perfect is the enemy of good. We're not aiming for perfect straight out the gates. We're trying to improve, and we're trying to identify something that is better than not having that information. So if there's any of those kind of concerns around, well, it doesn't give you an accurate condition assessment or anything like that, well, it's giving you more of a condition assessment than you would have had without having any data for that parcel of land. And so we've got to keep learning and going on that journey. And as I said at the beginning, it's about embracing curiosity. It's looking at where those failures are potentially and not seeing them as failures, but seeing them as opportunities to change it. So for me, they're the kind of the key lessons. And that's why really for this kind of panel and this kind of conference, it's really important to me that we can share these learnings, but equally if anyone else has other issues that they can be shared as well, because that's the only way we're going to improve.
Yeah, that great summary, Graham. I think what I'll just add on the two-way collaboration is, I think that's something that, you know, what I really enjoyed about working with Severn Trent as one of our early customers is that very kind of mutually beneficial relationship allows us at Severn Trent to create a product and continue to evolve it in a way that it's very relevant and usable for that water industry use case. And I think given the characteristics of the water industry, you know, what's being built with a lot of feedback from Severn Trent is likely to be very relevant to other water companies as well. So that, you know, being able to have that close relationship and understanding the problems we're trying to solve through that direct communication really helps. I'll just also add on the last point of, you'll see on the page, the bottom right, the trying to be, you know, vulnerable in this session as well. As by no means do we intend that we have it perfect, like Graham was speaking to. I think we've noticed a few areas where the theme of controls has come up. So the first one is more controls around ensuring that the readers of the information, let's say of that preliminary habitat map, understand what they're looking at and have guidance around the understanding it in context. So for instance, not assuming kind of blindly following condition assessments that are provided as that starting point, and understanding how that information should be interpreted. The second piece of controls, it's a different type of control, but something that we've noticed on the AiDASH front, and I think it will resonate for a lot of water companies as well, is you often have this, let's say, the situation of competing priorities for a same parcel of land. And that's something where it's actually a really good use case for technology to help first uncover where you have those competing priorities, and then help with managing that. Because at the end of the day, you need to understand even what's going on a site in order to kind of get to the best outcome from improving its condition and its value from a nature perspective.
Okay, great. We will go into the Q&A session then from this point. And so if you could just stop sharing the presentation, we will get the questions in. Do keep putting your questions in as we go through what we've had so far. If anything occurs to you, as we will have plenty of time to look around to them. So, first question. Obviously, when you're adopting a new solution, a project team needs to build a value case within their organisation to be able to do so. Severn Trent, do you have any sort of guidance or advice for those looking to build a value case for implementing BNGAI in their organisation?
Yeah, so I think for me, the key one, and it's kind of slightly counterintuitive, is to think outside of just pounds, pence and shillings. It's about the added value that I talked about before on that return on investment. It's the speed of getting the data, it's the speed of being able to share it, it's the repeatability of it, it's the standardization of it, it's everything that doesn't necessarily have that financial quantifiable benefit, which is something we are working on, and we do recognise there are financial benefits. We've just not quite done those kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's to be able to share that at this stage. But certainly for me, it's just thinking beyond what is a kind of a financial only investment. It's about the data, and data is king.
Great, perfect. And Laura, do you have anything else that you would add to that, all from your field experience with using the app, and anything that you think would really stand out to any other organisations with why they should implement this solution?
as in advice for implementing it.
Yeah, or building the value case in the organisation as to why it should be implemented. You know, anything that really stands out to you as a piece of good investment.
I think the key really for us is around the standardisation. So we could get boots on the ground surveys, even if we had the time or resource to do so. But that would never be done by one company. And actually, you've got that sort of blanket approach across the estate, which helps with our reporting.
Yes, thank you so much. If I was looking to adopt this technology at my water company or organisation, what are some of the challenges that I could face? Has there been any kind of key challenges that have come up that you've had to kind of work to overcome?
And again, it kind of is counterintuitive to what I just said. The cost part is always going to come up because everyone works in pound, shilling and pence. So you've got to kind of overcome that because the finance departments often decide everything, don't they? So that's been a significant one. I think the other significant one is knowing what you've already got and also being able to translate it, because I think so many companies have already gone so far with either habitat reports or PEAs, or they've got data in some other format. Then the question is, well, why do I bother with this new piece of, and it's not a case of why do I bother, it's a case of, well, you can take all of that and package it into this system. So again, it's not a case of looking at this as a silo approach, it's about using this in addition to all the other tools. But yeah, they're the two kind of, it's the translatability into your existing systems and then also the finance bit. But again, if you embrace curiosity, if you can see beyond those, there are the values there to make it a worthwhile business case.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And speaking of the kind of tools that you're talking about work alongside this, are there any particular tools or requirements that a water company would need to have to be able to adopt this solution? Anything, you know, any software particularly being used or any type of equipment or anything like that? Or can you literally just run the app and that's that?
Well, I mean, you can just run the app. I mean, we can use it.
I think the positives of this platform, whether it be, you know, across an entire estate or just for one parcel of land, all you need to actually run the analysis is a red line boundary, typically in a shapefile format. You just drop it into the platform, or, you know, if it's like Severn Trent, where we have a large volume of sites, we have a very simple process set up to kind of mass intake shapefiles, but that's as simple as that. So I think, if anything, what takes a bit of time to think through is how this analysis fits into the existing workflows of that particular company. And I think that's where there's a level of, there's no one size fits all. It really depends on what's kind of the status quo and how can our analysis fit into that and kind of, be provided to as many types of users within that organization as well.
I think one of the points that was brought up before about it kind of being used for planning and stuff, we've certainly had other areas of the business that have kind of had design drawings that they've asked about whether or not that can be kind of translated in or vice versa. And I think they're the types of things that two-way relationship, you can create those opportunities if we ask the right questions, and then you can come to a solution where it is possible.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like it's actually been relatively easy to adopt it into Severn Trent's existing workflow. Is that right? Yeah,
no, I mean it's fit straight in with it. It's been a really useful tool. We've obviously, I think one of the other bits I suppose you need is functioning tablet or some form of equipment that you can take out to the field. But you can't show out with pen and paper. But apart from that, it's battery pack. But again, I think that's where a lot of surveying and stuff, so kind of use of infrared cameras and other assistance tools like that, they're becoming more prominent. And so it's just about having to evolve and adapt and buy the equipment that's needed if you need it. But yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And what SMEs or other people from my company would I need as part of my team if I wanted to adopt the solution?
I mean, definitely an ecologist.
Yeah,
That is always the intent. I mean, from various perspectives, you need ecologists to go do that they will be users of that mobile app that Lauren demonstrated earlier, but also just someone like a Victoria who has the kind of understanding of the Severn Trent estate and being able to, read the analysis and interpret it. I think that's what makes it the most powerful. It's always a question of not replacing that function at all. It's just empowering them with data and analysis to do their jobs more effectively.
Great.
I think it also depends on sort of the additional use cases that we've got. So, we're including people like Natural Capital, their team, CCS who run the capital schemes. There's all sorts, disposals. There's all sorts of teams within our business that could use AiDASH. But for now, obviously, our focus has been undertaking the estate scan. But there's all these other ways as well where other SMEs can get involved.
Yeah, I was going to, because the habitat data is essentially your natural capital asset register. So that's why they tie together really well.
Great, thank you. And that leads me nicely into the next question, which is about, you have alluded to some other use cases throughout this presentation for BNGAI specifically. For example, natural capital accounting and SUDS impact measuring. Would you be able to speak more to those and the progress of the trialing of those?
For sure. Lauren, feel free to jump in on the natural capital front as well. But essentially, we just this year, in this being curious and thinking about how you can use our platform in different ways. One of the ways that we've trialed is using our natural capital offering. So in the case of Severn Trent has published a natural capital account for the 2024 reporting year. And what we wanted to trial and see is if we kind of run Severn Trent data through our system and have essentially habitat information based off of much higher resolution data, how does that impact the natural capital value of the estate? So we ran Severn Trent data through our system from a natural capital calculation perspective. Aligning our system is aligned to the NCRAT framework to enable that kind of adhering to an industry standard ultimately, which we understand is very much NCRAT in the UK. But then being able to compare our results to what Severn Trent was able to generate from their own and understand, where those differences lie, trying to unpack why they exist. And we're currently now at the exploration stages of figuring out, okay, given the results that we've seen in this trial year, how can we equip Severn Trent with that information, and how does that get now embedded into those business as usual workflows? So that's one example. And Leah, you mentioned.
I'd like to jump in on the natural capital to say, so one of the principles of natural capital is you use the best data available to you. And generally speaking, with natural capital accounting, you'll use like large land cover data sets that cover the whole of the UK. And the resolution is not bad when you zoom out, but when you look on a side-by-side basis, you're not going to be getting the exact numbers. And so one of the benefits of using an actual scan like us is you're able to drill down that resolution. And so your natural capital account is so much more accurate because now you've actually captured, the exact number of concrete versus grasslands, etc. on the site, as opposed to when you zoom out and maybe you have it at like 100-meter resolution, you're going to miss a lot of that detail. So that's one of the nice ways I think that the systems do talk together, is that there is like actually a lot of overlap when you come down to it in terms of how much detail is good for this. You can always go deeper and you can always add more. And it's kind of like onions with the natural capital, because then you can start layering in other parts of the system where you've got like we have all of our protected areas that you can see on this system, and those are the kinds of things that you also kind of want to know your natural capital accounting, so you can start to kind of pull some of the same data sets across all those use cases.
Makes sense. And then just to come back to SUDS, or sustainable urban drainage systems, I think on that front, we're, I'd say, about midway through that pilot project. Basically, just to give a little bit more color around why this even exists as an innovation program. Essentially, so there were over 100 SUDS installed in Mansfield, which is a flood-prone town in England, and essentially Severn Trent wanted to be able to look into, is there a way to test and provide like an evidenced approach to show whether SUDS provide broader socioeconomic benefits beyond the obvious one of flood prevention. And so we're talking about things like biodiversity value, but also other metrics that come in through the like natural capital framework. So what we've been doing and testing, can't say we're at the point where we have a clear results quite yet, but what we've started off with is doing a scan of what existed on the ground, looking kind of a year before the installations were put into the ground, looking at what habitats were on site at that point in time. And then the idea is in 2026, we'll then be doing the similar scan to see once those sets have been installed, have had some time to kind of stabilize, let's say, in the environment, trying to then measure what is the delta in biodiversity value and other metrics as well between that post-construction scan, so 2026 timeframe, and pre-construction scan. And the point there is just to see what happens, what kind of results do we see. So for us, it's been a really interesting use case because we're running our program at a very different scale than we have been doing. So we're looking at, SUDS intervention level scale versus previously had been, the smallest scale had been, let's say, a small site ultimately. So lots of learnings on our side and more to come when we actually have performed that post-construction scan.
Great. And is there any learnings that come to mind now that you're willing to share with that side of things, or is it very much, we'll have to report on that when it's done?
Yeah, I think one thing that came up and it's kind of come up in a number of ways, but one of the benefits of using remote sensing imagery is you can go back in time and see what's been happening there. So I think that's a learning that we've brought as well into that biodiversity performance commitment perspective, as well as trying to see on an assessment that was done this year, well, what was the likely biodiversity value back in 2020, 2021? I'm trying to kind of, do kind of historical assessments as well. So that was kind of one meta point that has come up through that assessment.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. And in general for AiDASH, not just BNGAI, is there any kind of next steps, any more innovations coming in your future?
Yeah, always innovating. I'm just kidding. But so we are very, our team today is very much focused on BNGAI. So I won't talk about so much we have another product line that is very focused on utilities and vegetation management for utilities. Doesn't feel like necessarily the right audience for that today. But on the BNGAI front, I think, what we did do with Graham and Victoria, a couple months ago, is we did a bit of a look back to see what were we able to accomplish together in our first year of working together, and trying to align that to some clear business objectives that this team has, business and just nature objectives more broadly. And we use that framework to think about what are some key areas of functionality that we want to work together to design and be able to focus our development team on building. And so one of those use cases is monitoring. So basically, as part of our, what we have committed to doing with Severn Trent is several consecutive assessments of the estate year over year. And so we're right now figuring out, well, what kind of monitoring logic features would be helpful for Severn Trent to look at on the receiving end, to be able to conduct that analysis, both aggregating it from site level across the estate, but also conducting that time series analysis of what happened, what's the difference year over year. So that's one of the big areas of functionality that we're working on building. The field survey app is one that this will continue to evolve. We have a lot of new releases coming up with different functionality coming into play, but I think that's one of these other areas where we've defined with the Severn Trent team, we want to focus on boosting adoption of that application, as well as ensuring that all of the existing data from boots on the ground surveys can be integrated into the platform as well, like Graham was mentioning, so that essentially BNGAI can help serve Severn Trent as kind of like a system of record for nature data, specifically biodiversity. So those are a couple. There's a long list. I'm trying to keep it somewhat succinct.
Amazing, thank you so much. And is there potential at all for, as part of that, this is just my own curiosity,
Yeah.
is there potential at all for predictive AI, or, you know, like, we're planning to do this project here, how would that impact biodiversity in this site, or?
Yeah, so that's actually something, and Lauren, feel free to jump in as well, but we didn't demo it so much today because it's a different team within Severn Trent that's trialing it right now. But I think one of the core pieces of functionality that we offer is planning. So it's trying to enable that optioneering, early and frequent optioneering, to see how does my site evolve in terms of biodiversity value if I do certain things. That's at the core of it.
You can plan your uplifts in real time. It shows you what your percentage would be. It shows you what your new biodiversity points would be. It adds all those multipliers in that discount things like, you know, time to target, condition, difficulty, all of that gets auto calculated as well when you draw your plans on.
So that's one of the key pieces of functionality. Now, if we think more to like the capital projects team, is they will have designs of what they're planning to build, whether it be, I don't know, in addition to an existing waterworks or something like that. And those drawings are typically in a CAD format. So what we have in terms of functionality is we have the ability to import that design and overlay it to the baseline habitat map that we've created. And then allow you to see as a starting point, well, what is the impact that design will have on my parcel of land? Typically starts off with a deficit, and then what are some usually pouring concrete but then beyond that, what are some interventions that might make sense on this parcel of land to counteract that deficit and get to an uplift? And in the case of Severn Trent, they have a pretty ambitious target of 15% uplift on all capital projects. So that's one that's it's a feature that exists already. We're still in the early stages of exploring that adoption within Severn Trent, but it's one of our kind of most valuable features, I would say, across industries.
That's great. Yeah, sounds very exciting. Thank you for sharing. So some questions that have been coming in from the audience. We start with Zoe, who has asked, is this all compatible with Esri Arc Pro?
So most of the work is done on our platform. It has its own geospatial in-house capabilities, but you can export the data as shapefiles, and those shapefiles can be used in any of the GIS platforms, including ArcPro, QGIS, whatever your system happens to work with. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. And one from Hannah is, if you have 20,000 hectares, and AiDASH uses an average to predict condition, the only way to have accurate condition assessments is to ground truth. How can you actually predict if your total estate has deteriorated without ground truthing 20,000 hectares?
So what we're using the AiDASH data for is just one step in a sequential process, essentially, of looking at our estate. So what we're doing by having the surveys done every year is we'll be able to look at whether there's any wholesale habitat changes. So if it's changed from a grassland to an urban polygon, then that will kind of flag up as a key indicator that there has been a change there, and so we can look at those. What we've also then got is obviously our grounds maintenance contractors go out and do their own surveys as they're doing their work. So again, that will then complement that we're still maintaining those habitats to the same condition. We have management plans in place for our trifless eyes, and we have woodland management plans in place for other parts of our estate. So that will all go together towards a package of assurance that we're not deteriorating. But what this is going to do is give us that, it's those areas perhaps that we wouldn't have looked at before, those, again, going back to the unknown unknowns, which we will now know about. So if there's a wholesale habitat polygon type change, then we'll be able to go out and that will be flagged, and then we can then investigate it to see what it is. None of any of the sites that we're nominating to go into our biodiversity ADI will have a ecologist go out and do the ground truth in the condition assessment. So the baseline, those 20,000 hectares, that is only to assure that we're not deteriorating on a whole scale, which the performance commitment definition isn't prescriptive on. So this is our interpretation of it.
Very perfect. Nobody else wants to add anything for it?
I think it's just important to say that we wouldn't be able to ground truth 20,000 hectares every year. But what we are looking to do is to put in a programme of field checks that would cover like a representative sample every year. So to cover like a broad range of habitats, so that over time that data does become more accurate and that it will inform the rest of the results as well. So so with the absence of going out 20,000 hectares, this is like the next best thing that we can do for it.
Presumably having the data on the system also helps you determine which sites you're going to like how you actually plan your strategy for attacking all the field work over those years can be done more easily by targeting your high priority habitats or habitats that you feel like are most likely to change.
Yeah, and I think also say the previous 5 years we've had our own common a bespoke ODI where we've had biodiversity enhancement we've been doing, and we managed to do 16,500 hectares. And the process we had there wasn't to go out and check every 16,500 hectares every year, but a proportion of it, and depending on the accuracy and the confidence with that data, we would then obviously, if that was good, then we'd be like, okay, good, and then another random sample. If the confidence wasn't great, then we'd expand the sample set before we got to a level that, and obviously then make the intervention. So again, it's just about applying the right processes in place to make sure this is a tool, not a replacement.
Great, thank you. Apologies if this is the same question, it's worded slightly differently, so I'm glad to give it a different one. But Ian was wondering how accurate predicted condition has been after ground truthing has taken place.
Do you want me to tackle that one? So we have obviously a lot of teams that use our data, a lot of our own in-house field teams. And what we understand is that on average, our data is on average throughout England fairly accurate. Where it becomes complicated is that if you have an estate and you have a specific management approach, your estate may differ from the average conditions in England. And so it will really come down to your own management. But ultimately, if your estate is fairly average for England, the conditions should be fairly accurate. We think we're about 98% accurate across both habitat and conditioning in terms of our averages. But as with anything, what you're doing, if you're better than average, you may find we're less accurate. If you're worse than average, you may again find we're less accurate. So it really all depends on your own management.
Yeah, and we have done with a number of clients, just a comparison of what does like a field survey verified versus purely like remote sensing based results look like, how those results differ. I think we've been seeing over 90% accuracy between the two. But I think, again, just to harp on this message, the point is that that preliminary habitat map that we generate is not intended to reach that same level, that the exact same results as something that's been ground truth. So it's just setting that expectation.
And then I just want to add one more thing, which is, I don't know if you are an ecologist or if you've been into the field with ecologists, and there is nothing more entertaining than watching 5 ecologists argue over grasslands and grassland conditions, because the difference between a really good condition modified grassland and a slightly bad condition poor other neutral grassland is, honestly, ecologists will split hairs and come to blows over it. So as with anything, there is a certain amount of subjectivity, and so like we're very accurate, we're very confident in our results, but you put 5 ecologists in the room and watch them argue over conditions is all I'm going to say. And I think with our system, you will find the same level of splitting hairs and arguments.
Right. Yeah, and Lauren is an ecologist.
Yeah, I am an ecologist. I have split hairs in the field.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. Cool. The next question from Hannah is: are the final outputs or reports that will be generated to fulfil the Ofwat biodiversity performance commitment be consistent over the water sector, or are each water company looking at different outputs from AiDASH, specifically in regards to the BPC?
So
do you want me to have a slide tackle that, because I've worked across a couple of
sure, that sounds good.
So I think, having touched a few of the different projects that we work with, I would say the different water companies are, from a high level, using us kind of similar on biodiversity. So actually, the same way you discussed about, being able to scan the whole estate and being able to at least monitor that. That's very similar. But each water company have got their own things. And so they are looking at slightly different parts of our system and they're pulling slightly different data points. But on average, I would say there is a lot of overlap, and we're certainly finding that what we learn with one water company, we can then go and chat to with the next water company, and you can cross offer. So the more companies we're working with, the more I'd say they're kind of slowly aligning, because we're able to kind of share learnings, not just across what we're learning, but kind of conversely what they're learning as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think that comes back to the point, like Ram mentioned earlier, is that Ofwat wasn't prescriptive in saying this is how you are intend to receive that annual assurance, for example. So there is some level of interpretation of that guidance, and then perhaps certain water companies will strive for different levels of confidence around, you know, the data they're able to provide behind that annual assurance. So I think we also see different levels of what different water companies are striving for.
There's also the geographical things. I mean, obviously, Severn Trent is Wales and England, whereas some of the other water companies are purely England. And so the different water companies are going to have slightly different requirements from Ofwat and slightly different regional biases. So there is slight individualism, but I would say by and large, there's so much overlap that we can see there is kind of a consistent amount of data that's being offered to the companies. Yeah. We're using it in similar ways, I would say.
I think coming back to the knowledge sharing as well, it's the communication between the water companies, like outside of AiDASH as well.
Yeah.
You know, using things like the CAR network, which is the Conservation Access Recreation Group, you know, so that we can all talk to each other about how we're using AiDASH and the programmes as well to sort of interpret the Ofwat guidance.
Amazing. And in that work across the water companies, Lauren, have you come across any sort of, you know, has there been any notable challenges that, say, a smaller water company will face versus a larger one, or vice versa?
I think one of the things that's interesting is the different estate sizes. So some water companies have smaller estates than others, and it's sometimes more practical to kind of think about, okay, well, we're gonna ground survey 25% of our estate for a smaller water company, rather than a big one. It's also a geographical location. So I think about some of the Severn Trent sites. They are in deep Wales, high upland sites. You know, I live in deepest, darkest Devon, so I can say that. But, you know, it's like we're talking upland sites here. They're not really easy to get to. You can't just jump on the train and be there in 20 minutes. Like, so actually being able to go and ground survey these sites can be really tricky, and you may not be visiting them as often. Whereas maybe a more urban water utility, you know, all the sites are in and around urban areas. So I think it really does depend on the company. But I would say a large estate that's more remote, you can definitely see the benefit of an approach like this, because it is harder to get boots on the ground, particularly if we're talking boggy soils, we're talking, you know, it's not always easy to walk across these sites.
Yeah.
So having an eye in the sky that can kind of just give you a high level view of what's there is sometimes easier or better, I would say, on a very large estate, you know, that is more rural.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Severn Trent, do you have any comments on your specific challenges versus what a smaller company would face?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, one of our main challenges with boots on the ground surveys is actually around arranging access. So depending on the water company's sort of estate size, but also the type of sites that they've got. So we have a lot of so obviously the visitor sites, they're a little bit easier to get surveyors out to. But on our operational sites, understandably, they're very secure, and there's a whole sort of host of work and planning that has to go on as sort of prep work to the survey. So there's all that side as well. Obviously, if you have a smaller estate, there'd be less of that in theory, depending on the type of site that you've got.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Graham, any thoughts that you want to add on? Or
No, I think it's not just size, isn't it? It's the space in between.
Yeah,
So like in our Wales estate, 90% of it's on one estate, on one site, whereas where in England, well, even 6,000, 8,000 different sites, in which case trying to go around every one, get keys, get access, and sometimes some of these sites as well, one of the benefits of having that remote sensing is even the traditional ecologists won't be able to see all of the sites. So you might have kind of either a security fence, in which case it's obscured, the view's obscured, there's just no way of getting into that stuff. And we certainly, when we first paired up with AiDASH, we compared one of their surveys on a site with a traditional ecologist, and both had negatives and both had positives, but one of the strong positives was this particular area couldn't be accessed by foot, and so we were able to get a snapshot of that, which was something we wouldn't have had without it.
brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much. So next question is from Terry, who wants to know, are there timescales for completion in relation to the pilot at Mansfield Suds?
So we will only be able to actually measure that uplift once we have given the actual physical installations the time to establish themselves. And so that's why I was mentioning that 2026 timeframe, just based off of when the actual installations, the construction work was completed a little bit earlier this year. So we need to give nature its time to actually do its work. And that's where the 2026 timeframe comes in.
Perfect, great, thank you. And we can always update the case studies on that platform when we do have those results for anybody who is curious to see those. Next question from Moomin, just on the point about remote sensing and looking at historical changes, we are embarking on a new Ofwat innovation project you may be aware of called SpaceEye. This is South Staff's water for context, where it will give us multispectral satellite imagery every 6 hours or less. Will this higher frequency of images benefit?
Well, I guess it really would depend what you're using it for. So, I mean, hyperspectral data is really, really interesting. One of the things that is a challenge with hyperspectral data is water actually blows out the hyperspectral spectrum. So if something's wet, you struggle to see what's actually happening. But I do think that kind of frequency is really interesting. And what you could do is you could see if you've got leaks. I see about it more from like a practical point of view, more than an environmental point of view. I worked on some sort of cutting edge hyperspectral projects before joining AiDASH, and I'd say, well, the technology is really, really interesting, and there's a lot of really good work actually being able to like use it to kind of know, okay, what species of grass am I looking at? Like, we're not really there yet with the hyperspectral data, but that kind of frequency can tell you a lot about change. It can tell you a lot about definitely looking at water moving through the environment. I can see that would be useful. We're not yet using hyperspectral data at scale in our platform, and that's because the constellations that collect the data on satellites are still very young and they're only launching. And so we're not getting kind of real-time coverage like we need, because the data we use is collected a lot more often, and a lot of these technologies are kind of emerging. But we're certainly looking at things like hyperspectral and how we can bring them into the platform in the future. But I would be interested to hear the results of that study.
Yeah,
so we should have that conversation.
I'm interested between the two. Yeah,
Indeed.
absolutely.
Indeed.
Great, perfect. So next question is, what raw data did you use to predict the average habitat condition across England?
So this was actually, funny enough, a lot of our early companies who signed up with us had a lot of data, as we've spoken about. So some of our estate clients that we worked with early on when AiDASH was kicking off had a number of years worth of phase 1 habitat condition data and other BNG from the early metrics version 1, 2, and 3 condition assessments, which they had collected. And so we scanned all of these estates for these early clients of ours. And so we ended up with a vast data set where we were matching conditions that we knew to known dates of surveys and imagery. So that was kind of the basis of our countrywide condition data set, was we had thousands and thousands and thousands of hectares of condition data, and then we averaged it out, we did the statistical analysis, and that's kind of our baseline data set. And then obviously, as now we've emerged as a company and we're getting more mature, we're collecting more condition data all the time through our app. And so we do expect kind of in the near future, we've kept them stable because we want people to have something predictable, but we do think in the near future, we're going to take the data we've been collecting over the next few years, relook at those numbers, compare them to what we have from our initial, and see if maybe we need to tweak any of those conditions. But for now, I think we're fairly confident based on how big the data set was to start with. We're pretty comfortable, but we will keep refreshing them and looking at them as the data comes in from the app. So the more people use our app, I think the better those conditions will become over time.
Great, thank you. And then a question from Dan. This is the last one I have from the live audience. So if the live audience do have any more questions from what you've heard so far, do keep popping them in the chat. We've got plenty of time left. So next question from Dan is, what are the indicative costs to the company using this platform? Presumably there are one-off setup costs and ongoing licensing costs for using the platform. Presumed costs would relate to the size of the company estate.
Yeah, I can take that. I think so. It's actually, there's just one kind of cost. It's a software as a service license, and that is directly, the cost of that is directly proportional to the size of the estate. So there's usually a cost per hectare, and that's usually, no, that is how we calculate the cost to the client ultimately.
Tiering.
Yeah, so obviously, depending on how you intend to use our platform, whether it's, site by site or across an entire estate, there are different ways that, pricing works ultimately. But in the case of a water company statewide, that's kind of your base level price, and that's what we'll feed it. Now, just to be transparent, as we explore different types of use cases with Severn Trent, There are other, depending on the way the platform is used, there could be other costs as well. Like, for example, I was mentioning earlier, the ability to upload a site design, a CAD file, that will come at an incremental cost per design uploaded. So there are little bits and bobs here and there depending on what you're actually doing.
Shapefile export as well can be an additional cost.
Yeah, but I would say that the vast majority of that price will come from the size of what you're trying to scan.
And then also if we're doing something like NatCap, it may be an additional, on top of the biodiversity, which is sort of the basic package is always the biodiversity BNG.
Yeah, but again, that also will come, the calculation logic of proportional to the state will hold true.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. So obviously a big theme of this showcase so far has been about the Ofwat biodiversity commitment. What can you kind of explain in a little bit more detail, Severn Trent, how this is actually helping you to meet that commitment?
So, as I said before, the first kind of piece it's doing is it's giving us that assurance of no deterioration on any changes of habitat type on that kind of primary habitat type. But then what it's also helping, and kind of like Eloise mentioned as well, it's going to give us that strategic direction as to where to focus our efforts. What we're not trying to do, contrary to a lot of people that use the biodiversity net gain metric, is we're not trying to use it to predict habitat improvements or to predict unit types. So we want to kind of almost create that invisible wall. So we're only focusing on the areas that have strategic significance, either kind of within local nature recovery strategies or kind of protected site areas or within buffer zones of those. And we're trying to kind of apply all of those logics to it as opposed to looking at where are we going to get the most unit return, because that doesn't always drive the right behaviours. Inevitably, you will get unit benefit from it. But what the AiDASH data is going to give us is all the different habitat types within our estate. As I said before, that we're not looking at, we can then go and ground truth those areas, but also we can use the wider data outside of our estate and looking at, as I said, other data sets, B-lines, different woodland parcels, all of those things to kind of try and apply the Lawton principles as well. So we are kind of providing a wider benefit beyond just the Ofwat metric. I think the Ofwat metric is useful to drive, to encourage water companies to kind of consider biodiversity as a performance commitment, but we've been using biodiversity as a performance commitment for the last 5-10 years, so it's not going to change our approach or our attitude or our ambition to improve and be environmental leaders. It's just another way of scoring what we've already been delivering.
I think it can help as well with forecasting. So on the back of what Graham's saying in terms of like we aren't a team just to generate units, and actually what would be best for the site, we can sort of more easily use that sort of platform tool to draw polygons of certain sections. So we might say we want this to be more of a mosaic. We might want, to let the woodlands sort of start to encroach on the grassland area, and we can sort of play around with that more so than you could just, or from my experience with a metric, where generally if you're doing forecasting on that, you're usually just changing your condition or your habitat type, whereas you can sort of come up with designs that relate more to what we want to achieve on the site rather than just looking purely at sort of the BNG metric.
So you're also getting that like spatial layer in where you can kind of see what it would look like if you were walking through it as a recreational user as well, and kind of just high level it. Yeah.
And I think just obviously the change in the polygon lines, if you make that woodland bigger, it's easier to do that within the tool as opposed to if you've got two different polygons, you're more likely to go, well, we'll just change the whole polygon or a half of it or a percentage of it because it's easier to calculate.
And then you would have to think what gave to make it bigger or smaller. So then you would have to figure out which habitat you're taking. But if you can see it visually, you're like, oh, we'll just put it into this grassland here. Or...
So as an example, at Carsington, when we were doing the walkover, there's an area of grassland there where we were looking at sort of reducing the sort of sharp edges around the side by woodland encroachment. There's a footpath that leads down to the reservoir, and the visitor experience team have asked for us to keep the vegetation short in front of the footpath so that there's still this sort of viewpoint, and the the sort of benefits that provides to visitors. So we were able to, draw a polygon to keep this area of grassland as a grassland, to sort of scrub up some other areas and to increase the amount of woodland. Like you say, it didn't mean that we needed to go through and work out how much of a hectare was going to go into which sort of row within the metric. So I think the forecasting side is another part that really helps us with our Ofwat commitments.
And I'll say that's one of the, as I was alluding to before as well, this planning functionality or the forecasting, like Victoria called it, is one of the areas where we're seeing a lot of engagement from all across different industries, whether you're house builder, water industry, etc. So this is where we're investing a lot of our R&D efforts to continuously evolve that planning functionality. Just a few examples, we've been launching on a continuous basis different map operation tools within the platform. So you'll see for our GIS experts, a lot of those the most popular types of operations like your snap to shape and things like that, we're embedding directly into the platform. So it's something to really just allow that visual what if scenario calculations as much as possible, and really trying to put into practice that DEFRA guidance of conducting that optioneering early and often.
So on that, it's basically the mitigation hierarchy, which you may be applying it for Ofwat BNG purposes, you may be doing it for natural capital, and it's essentially like when you're looking at land and you're planning out what you can do before you've even bought it, is you could compare two land parcels and go which one would be easier to build. Let's say we wanted to build a new reservoir, or let's say we want to build some new infrastructure. You can compare two pieces of land and go which one would give us the best biodiversity. Or maybe you're thinking about selling a portion of your estate. You can go, okay, well, what would be what would we lose from a natural capital or biodiversity if we sell this portion versus another portion? So it goes kind of beyond that, like pure planning and forecasting, but taking a step out and looking at that avoid part of the mitigation hierarchy, because the mitigation hierarchy goes like avoid, reduce, restore, and then offset. So if you can start right up at that avoid, often that happens long before you've even had boots on the ground. And this kind of allows you to think through some of those changes, even if you don't own the land yet, even if you're just considering buying it, you can give us the red line boundary and you can know something about that property as part of your investment. So it doesn't have to just be part of your Ofwat commitment.
Yeah.
There are other ways in the portfolio.
It's amazing. I'm sure a very useful tool for many. Great. So what type of remote sensing data are you using and at what resolution?
Okay, I'll take this one again. So we use a number of different data sets, and I think that's kind of the power of it. So we use satellite imagery, we've discussed it. So we will use 30 centimeter satellite imagery. We'll also use aerial fixed wing imagery that can be as low as 5 centimeters in some of the areas. It averages between 7 and 15 centimeters in most parts of England. And that really the reason why we would use both is timing. So some of the fixed wing providers kind of do like a 3-year service, so you might not get the most accurate, most up-to-date images, but we would use our satellite, which we can task 30 centimeters, or we just know we've always got really accurate, really common, lots and lots of data there. We then layer in things like your priority habitat data sets, we layer in soil data sets, we layer in ordnance survey data sets. So we've got things like the ancient woodland inventories there. We've got the ancient tree inventories. So some of it's bespoke data that we've had to pay for to bring into the platform. Some of it is the freely available data. Some of it is our own models. We run a whole bunch of models in the background that are giving us all kinds of data. So it's totals all the way down essentially, and we use all kinds of data, whatever data we can get our hands on. But it's essentially satellite plus geospatial, natural England and DEFRA data and soil data that we interlock.
And I'll just say that, so we use it internally to produce those preliminary maps, but we also make a lot of these data layers available to the end user. We didn't demo that in the platform, but happy to show that at some later point, where you can basically overlay these different sources of information and see, okay, well, which priority habitats are present on site or nearby. One example of where we've taken great feedback from our clients and kind of shared the knowledge beyond, as well as one of our clients had said, well, soil data is really helpful for us to always look at when we're doing this kind of analysis. So that's another layer that we use to produce the map, but we also kind of hand it back to the client as well to be able to manipulate that.
And one other thing we didn't really show in our demo is that for every site that we get this preliminary map for, you can export like a little report. And in that report, there's various maps. You would see the soil map. You'll see a map that shows all the designated sites within I think it's 10 kilometers. You can set your different buffers. You can see all the ancient trees on site. You can see if there's any priority habitats. And we bring all of that. And then we also do something, we do like an opportunity mapping where we kind of look at the condition versus the habitat type and distinctiveness. And so you can kind of look at those high and low opportunity areas within your site. So there's all kinds of maps that come in our reporting that we didn't demo, but they're there. The data's just hiding.
So all I'm hearing is maps, maps, and more maps. All of the maps.
Every map.
Great, perfect, thank you. So how, sorry, we've already asked that one actually. Is BNGAI interoperable with other systems or tools that water companies are already using? I think we've kind of touched on that, but it can be integrated quite easily into.
Yeah, so integrations is actually one of the other themes of things we're looking at it with Severn Trent. I mean, basically the premise is how can we both take Severn Trent information, bring it onto the platform, like let's say previously conducted boots on the ground surveys, and be able to share that back, stack that information with what we produce. But also we have been having discussions around using or kind of connecting our data back to other systems within Severn Trent. I think it's a little bit too early stages to name names here, but the point is what we're trying to do is make this data available to as wide an audience as possible within Severn Trent. We know that our core expertise is being that system of record for nature data. We don't claim to want to encroach too far beyond that. But the point is, obviously, clients like Severn Trent are using various different systems, and we want to make that connection really nice and seamless. So it's something we're working on this year. But at a minimum, what you can definitely do today is you can export shape files like we talked about earlier. And as an ecologist or a GIS analyst, you can take that baseline habitat map and manipulate it within your tool of choice for GIS purposes.
Yeah, I'd say that, I mean, I worked previously in Canada with some of the other water industry tools, and most of them do take into account shape files as well. So I know that there'll be things like whiskey, which you could bring the shape files into, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And just to, oh, sorry, we have actually, no, we haven't, we've asked that one. So just to, before we wrap up, do you have any sorts of any final thoughts that you would like to share? Severn Trent to water company thoughts you think are worth sharing to wrap up on, or AiDASH to, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think again on that knowledge sharing you mentioned about the CAR group, it would be really interesting to hear from other water companies how they're interpreting the Ofwat guidance, and particularly if they are using BNGAI, the way that they're looking to use the information.
Great, yeah, that'd be brilliant. To anyone in the audience that does have that kind of information and is interested in knowledge sharing, we will put the contact details for the presenting team into the chat and on the case study, but you can also contact Spring if you'd like to be put in touch with anybody from the presenting team too. Great, well, I think that is the final question. We haven't had any more through, so I think that's a good time to wrap up. I just want to say thank you again to everybody who has taken time out of their day to join us today. We really hope it was a valuable session for you and that you learned lots of valuable things to take back to your organisation. Thank you to AiDASH and to Severn Trent for sharing so openly and so honestly, and for all the really hard work that went into this presentation. We really appreciate it. My colleague is just going to put the link to the poll again into the chat in a minute. So if you could make sure to answer that poll, leave us your feedback before you log off today, that would be great. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.